Hello, everyone. Dr. Judy here of Dr. Judy WTF What the Freud. And by popular request, we are doing part 2 on damaging effects of narcissistic mothers on their children. And just a couple of announcements before we get into it. And this, unfortunately, is an epidemic based on the number of call-ins we had last week and based on the number of comments, letters, level of pain that I see in my office. And we already have a call-in. Hold on 1 minute. We'll take the call-in. I want to let people know, number one, we do offer free consultations on the mindmap system. If you book one, you automatically will get a download of the PDF copy of my book. Here it is. Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. And I'm going to be reading some excerpts from the book. If I can get a word in edgewise, I have a feeling, though, that we're going to get a lot of call-ins today. So please like us on Facebook and please subscribe to our channel and understand that a narcissistic mother was also injured at the causal level, and as a result of that, she multi-generationally is transmitting her narcissistic injuries to the next generation. So, hi, you are on the couch with Dr. Judy, and who is calling, please? Hello, hello, are you still there? Still there? You do hear him? Hello? Okay. Please speak up, call back, join the conversation. I know that there are a lot of people out there that are in pain and suffering. Another announcement that I wanted to make is that one of the staff members, Yitz Epstein, is going to be holding meetup groups for people recovering from narcissistic abuse. And this is happening in our new beautiful Sherman Oaks office on Ventura and Hazeltine and Sherman Oaks. So please do call the office for that. And hello, we've got our caller back. You are on the couch. And
hello.
Hi, who am I talking to, please?
My name is Jamie.
Jamie?
Yes.
Nice to meet you. Hi, Jamie. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Philadelphia.
Okay, welcome to the show. And tell me a little bit about your knowledge of the mind map, and if you've been a listener, if you know anything about what the Freud I'm talking about, and then tell me a little bit about what's going on in your life.
Sure. I really just started listening not too long ago, so I've heard some about the mind map. I've listened to some of your shows that kind of mapped out what that looks like, the different parts, but I haven't fully memorized the whole system yet, or I'm not as, closely aligned with it as somebody who may have been watching it longer.
Sure. And I'll go over it briefly just so that people can follow along, and then I'll ask you what's going on in your life and we can begin to mind map it. Is that okay with you?
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay. So if you would, there it is. Mind map is up. So the mind map is based on a system that I created originally to help heal global disconnect. And it turned into my psychological model of healing. And the essence of the mind map is identifying childhood wounds, how we react to them, and how we encode them into the fiber of our being. So that would be panel 1, 2, and 3. There are 5 childhood wounds that are most come up in therapy, and they are physical, sexual, and verbal emotional abuse, neglect, and smothering. When a parent is a parent who puts themselves before their child, they do big damage. And that's what I mean by the system gone wrong. And that's my definition of narcissism, whereby the parent puts herself or himself before the child. And what that does to the psyche is it breaks us down into panels 4, 5, 6, which is chaos, then we defend against all of that damage, and then we have a big breakdown. And if you're in therapy, especially if you're in mind map therapy, then we turn that breakdown into a breakthrough so that you can paradigm shift and shift out of your, I call it the cracked lens of perception, into panel 7, 8, 9, paradigm shift, healing, and unity, a sense of peace. So with that said, please tell me a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to call in tonight.
Sure. So I really just probably within the last year realized or learned kind of where a lot of these childhood wounds from having a narcissistic mother has been reemerging as patterns within my life. I didn't ever even know what, like, I always thought narcissism was just somebody who kind of talked about themselves a lot or whatever. But
right.
I'm now at a point where I'm actually learning like what it's meant and how it's really impacted me. So I grew up with in a single parent home as the only child of a narcissistic mother who was just very smothering, and her identity of self was very closely related to me. And then as an adult, I've been playing out these patterns over and over again in my relationship. So I'm currently going through a divorce or divorcing somebody who I believe is a narcissist who's kind of playing out these very same patterns.
Yes.
And learning what that means in a relationship with a lover as it does with, in a parent. And so what I'm finding now is that I've been accepting these patterns of behavior.
Right.
Because it's just kind of all I've known, and it's almost like I'm trying to go back.
Exactly.
And fix it.
Exactly. So what you said covers so many shows that I've done, including the show that I did on the herder can't be the healer, meaning that we keep going back. We do a WTF, a what the Freud. We go back to the herder or a representative of the herder who does the same dynamics to us that was done in our family of origin. So we replicate the pattern of the old blueprint because the parents blueprinted that and our parents set the bar. And then we find ourselves in relationships that recapitulate and open up old childhood wounds and then take us down the tubes into the WTF zone, the chaos defenses, and the final breakdown in divorce or final breakdown in health or mental health or any sort of breakdown that is traumatic and dramatic in nature. So, yes, you understand that it sounds like you had a very codependent relationship with your mother. Is that what you're describing?
I would say so. My mother, she has a lot of other things going on with her. So we had a bad relationship. I would work or just try to be out of the house to not be around her. We literally argued every day. She yelled every day.
Okay.
But she also was very she was also very scared of everything. So, I took a lot of the leadership role in the help. She was a teacher, but I would have to anytime grades were due, she'd wake me up out of my sleep to help her with computer work or just whatever she needed from me. I was there to serve her.
Yes. Yes.
And it wasn't about what I needed or what my needs were as a developing human. It was about what she wanted for me.
There it is. What she wanted for you. So who came number one?
It was she did usually. I didn't have a choice. I was held hostage. When I would try to leave, I did try to move out a few times, and she'd always threaten to have me put away if I didn't come home or different things. So I didn't really have a lot of outlets, and our family wasn't there. I grew up in a city away from my mother's family. My father's family isn't even in the country, and that's a whole different story.
Where was
he was never present.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, where was your father in this picture?
My parents met in college, really just had a very brief relationship. My father just come from Lebanon to to be a student, and she ended up getting pregnant with me. He was there, I think, for like a summer semester.
Okay.
And she would always, tell these stories about how he wanted to marry her and all these things, but it was the religions and the different things. But the truth of the matter is that my father really couldn't be there for me, because he was literally had just left this country to come here and go to school. And it just wasn't, he had been in the country for 3 months when she got pregnant, and he tried to stay in touch, and help, but she made it really difficult. And then eventually created this scenario, kind of like, I think there was a movie called Not Without My Daughter, and that he would like try to kidnap me and take me to Lebanon. And I don't even think that was the case, because I'm half Black and half Lebanese. And he, as an adult, I kind of learned that he couldn't even really tell his family that he had a child. Like, culturally, they just wouldn't have understood. So they didn't even know I existed until I was about 20.
So there are a lot of disconnects here. There is a father-daughter disconnect. There's a disconnect between your mother and your father. There are cultural disconnects in that you may not have been accepted into the Lebanese family. Maybe some secrets involved. So look at your blueprint, correct? And then when your mother doesn't have the support of your father, your pillars. If you look at panel number 3 as a metaphor, and these mind map panels are metaphors, and I use them in different ways all the time. Let's just use it as a metaphor for your mother is the pink strand, let's say, and your father is the blue DNA strand. They both contribute to your fiber of your being, your blueprint. And when they're not together and they're not working as a unit, it doesn't allow for you to lean on them. So it doesn't allow for you to develop your inner core, because you're too busy holding up that one strand left, which is your mother. And so she's weakened. She's dependent. She has no support system. So when the father, which is supposed to be the nurturer of the nurture, is no longer present, look what happens. Look what happens to the DNA strand. Stare at panel 4 for a minute, and you will see that the whole structure of the family falls apart. It's not sustainable. So it goes into chaos. And if you're watching this, if you're listening, I guess you can catch the mind map on my website, drjudywtf.com. You can see it there. And if you're watching, you could see the little people flying off the DNA strands into the ozone, because there's no structure. And that's a little bit like you, but you weren't flying off the handle because your mother was trying to super glue you to her so that she could stay erect in some fashion, so that she can reconstitute herself, but she didn't have a strong enough core to do that, so she borrowed your energy to do that. And guess what that did to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, fast forward to, adult life, and starting to, for the first part of my life, I really made a lot of decisions based upon, will I be letting her down or my family down or other people down? And then eventually I started having to make these decisions for myself. So who do I want to be? How do I want to show up in the world? What do I even want to do with my life? So my mother and I, sorry.
No, I was just going to point out the guilt that she instilled in you. So that was part of the hostage situation, part of the strings attached, that if you dare put yourself first, if you dare say no to grading the papers or whatever she needed you to do, not a good idea at all. And probably guilted and shamed for it. So go ahead.
Absolutely. She's actually the type that will even do the smallest thing, and then, take credit for it. And so then when you don't do what it is that she wanted you to do, or you disagree with her, or you go against her, whatever the case may be, she's going to cry, and she's going to shout, and she's going to
make a tantrum. make
get
a
attention
tantrum.
from whoever she could get it.
So
Yeah.
hold
And
on a minute, because I just want to read a little excerpt from the book, because I want to mind map this a little further and also educate the audience on long-term effects of narcissistic abuse on the adult. And again, if you ask for a free consultation, you will get a download of my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. And so this is on page 75 for those of you who have the book or the PDF version. I have seen the devastating consequences of narcissism time and time again in my practice. It's heartbreaking. The adult loses out on a normal childhood, if there's such a thing, by having to be more parent than child. That absolutely applies to you. They come to me feeling unloved, uncared for, and unimportant, which is, by the way, what might have landed as pieces of your core belief. Oftentimes, they feel like they are crazy because their mother or father has manipulated their sense of reality for so many years. Okay, so what happens is that as adults, they have low self-esteem. Can you relate to that?
I think so now.
Okay.
I think so.
Mistrust of other adults. Can you relate to that?
Yeah, I mean, these things are coming to the surface, but I never realized that they were happening. I think now I'm just starting to see maybe where they've come into play.
Okay, so my point is that all of these symptoms that you're experiencing have a cause. And the truth is that a narcissistic parent is a parent who was injured at cause. So your mother was injured. Your father was injured. They passed it on to you. What needs to happen on a grand macro human scale is for us all to heal our emotional wounds as best as we can so that we don't pass them on to the next generation. And for those of you who don't want to have children, it doesn't matter. Heal your wounds anyway, because you don't want to project them onto other people, and you certainly don't want to stuff them down into repression and depression and experience a sense of lifelessness and unexpressed emotions. So can you see how this narcissistic dynamic has absolutely thrown you into chaos, defenses, and breakdowns? And so just one more question, and then I'll move on to other callers who might want to call in and more information. One thing, I want to read this to you, okay, because I have it at fingertip access, and the audience can relate. Narcissistic, there was one article, hold on a minute, I really wanted to read it to you because it totally applies to you. Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers by Darlene Lancer, LMFT, how it sets you up for marrying an abuser. Okay, so I'll just read a little and then audience can relate to this. Our mother is our first love. She's our introduction to life and to ourselves. She is our lifeline to security. A narcissistic mother who cannot empathize damages her children's healthy psychological development. That's obvious. So here's what specifically to mothers, some of the effects on daughters are different than on sons because girls usually spend more time with their mother and look to her as a role model. Due to lack of boundaries, which you described, her waking you up in the middle of the night, I can't think of a better example of lack of boundaries in your case. Narcissistic mothers tend to see their daughters both as a threat and as an annex to their own egos. So can you see that about what your mother did? You were an annex to her ego. Through direction and criticism, they try to shape their daughter into a version of themselves or their idealized self. At the same time, they project on their daughter not only unwanted and denied aspects of themselves, such as self-centeredness, obstinance, selfishness, and coldness, but also disliked traits of their own mothers. Okay? Do you have any siblings?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
So tag, you were it. You were the projection. You got...
I was.
Yeah.
I wanted to share my experience a little bit because I think that what happened with me and being in that situation, and it was very extreme, and I don't have time to get into all of it, but what I can say is that it created in me, and I started to see it probably in my teenage years, and it's gotten worse the older I've gotten, and I'm just starting to get into DBT therapy and different types of therapy to work through these things. But I started to develop borderline personality disorder. I started to develop deep codependency. So, you know, relationships that weren't healthy, accepting things that I know I shouldn't have. So like, you know, not necessarily making partners commit or, you know, accepting things that I shouldn't have in those relationships because I wanted that love, you know, or falling into partners who kind of love bombed up front.
Yes.
And created these really great scenarios. And then when things turned or once they got me kind of hooked in, keep like accepting like the bad treatment or giving them room to do things like even like I know that they may be cheating or I know they may be doing something else and being like, okay, well, they're going to come around or I can love them through this or I can heal them through this.
Right. And that's a form of idealized narcissism. Not that you're a narcissist, but that the idea that you can cure the narcissist by love, you can cure the narcissist by showing them the unconditional, and it's just absolutely not the case, because what's needed here is for them to be in treatment and to deal with their false sense of self and to deal with the heart shell that they erected around their heart, which allows them to mistreat other human beings. And so with that said, you could see that you were groomed. You were absolutely primed for the pump to be a great victim, so to speak, for someone who was interested in vampiring your psyche, your services, whether they be loving services, sexual services, favors, and so on and so forth. And this all got laid down at the causal level. Can you see that?
Absolutely, yes.
So I want to tell you to please don't hesitate to call in for a free consultation, even though we've spoken, and learn more about this and ask for a free copy of the PDF book. I'm very happy to send it to you. And I really appreciate you sharing this. Any other last minute thoughts or questions that you wanted to ask?
Yeah. I mean, so as I'm coming out of this relationship and I'm thinking about all the really poor choices I've made out of fear of loss or abandonment or just wanting that love there, how moving forward can I avoid falling into these patterns and just falling into these same type of people replaying this again and again?
Okay, so step number 1, identify the childhood wounds. Identify your negative core belief, which you can do by, obviously, you can start doing by reading the book and then enlisting the help of a mind map therapist. I also have a mind map video series that you can purchase anytime that walks you through all of this. Mainly, the question is a great question. How do you get rid of the toxins? How you get rid of the toxins is absolutely have an opportunity to, I think the best word I can use here is to exorcise your feelings in a therapeutic environment so that they don't live within you. And once you get in touch with the rage, once you get in touch with the toxicity and the shame and the guilt and reprocess these emotions, you won't be chasing the WTF because it'll be like a file is done. What's a WTF? An incompletion. You're not finished. As Freud said, unfinished business will compel someone to do it again and again and again, the broken record quality. So once you finish the business therapeutically, you don't have to go out into the world and latch on to somebody that is a representation of that unfinished business to try to finish the business with that person, because they'll never do it. They'll just keep ripping open your old childhood wounds. Okay. And definitely ask for a free copy of the PDF book, and we can download it to you tomorrow.
I downloaded it. I got it.
You got it? Okay. Excellent.
I did. Excellent.
It.
I actually did it tonight. So I have it. I'm going to start reading it.
Very excellent.
Thanks so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for calling in. And unfortunately, this is such an epidemic. If there's anyone else that would like to call in, please feel free to get on the couch with your emotional ouch around the topic of damaging effects of narcissistic mothers on their children. And I've had several people call in and tell me horrible, horrible stories about their narcissistically injured experiences. I think we have another call in. And so thank you so much for calling in. And who am I speaking to, please?
Hey, Dr. Judy. My name is Clint.
Hi, Clint. How you doing?
Good, good. It's an honor to talk to you. It's kind of surreal. I've been watching probably about 150 of your videos and reading your book.
God.
And it's so good. Yeah.
Am I making any sense yet? Does anybody out there understand me? Okay. Okay. So
yeah, you know, it's I'm feeling a lot of the poison being released, and I'm feeling it in my body coming out. You know, I had some therapy before this, but I'd really like to ask you a specific question about engulfing and enmeshment and how you talk about the interject and internalizing like the other.
Okay. Okay. And just before I answer that, because I have a lot to say on that subject, I'd just love to know, where are you calling from?
Oh, I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. I just love to know where people are, and it kind of makes me feel like I get to travel around the world and get to know people from all different parts of America, Canada, and Europe. And okay, so go ahead. Hit me up with your questions about that.
So I kind of matched the pattern of the covert incest and the enmeshment of the narcissistic mother.
Yes.
And I had some of the dissociation and the depersonalization.
Okay.
I'm kind of looking at, like, I guess what you would call, I think it's like, you know, the last three panels where you're trying to get to your core beliefs.
Okay.
And I got a lot of engulfing and enmeshment, and it was almost like I felt like I was the property of the other. I was a drug to feed off of.
Yes.
And it was almost like my core belief was something like, I don't have rights, or I belong to my mom, I belong to my dad, I don't belong to myself.
Yes.
But what happened was, it was almost like every other person kind of got seen that way too, if that makes sense. So
you
mean,
was like other people, like siblings, family members, friends. Who are you referring to?
Like in my adult life. I mean, all of the above, but basically, like, you know, it was almost like it was internalized, where I kind of went into a codependency, a people pleasing, but kind of an isolating people pleasing rather than a chaos creating. So it was almost like I felt like when I would be around other people, I used to feel, things have gotten a whole lot better, but in the beginning it was like when I was around other people, I would start to feel them sucking at me and sucking my energy, even if they weren't the same kind of narcissistic pattern. So it was kind of almost like people that met the pattern of my mom or my dad would suck at my energy more and vampire more. But even people who didn't quite do it would almost trigger that internalized other, where they would feel like they were sucking at me too.
Interesting.
So I'd get real drained. Yeah, I'd get real drained, and I'd kind of isolate.
Okay, so this is a really interesting angle to the narcissistic system, because you're saying that even people who weren't necessarily narcissistic would depend upon you. Is that pretty much what you're saying?
In the beginning, but then after some therapy, what would happen is kind of what you say. The more people that were narcissistic would vamp more, if that makes sense. But in the beginning, it was like it was happening with everybody I met, and then with more and more therapy, it became, okay, it's only happening with people that match the original pattern.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. It's something that I've never really heard put that way, and I will give my thoughts about that. Is that somehow that was your modus operandi? So you encouraged it on some level. Okay, just the way you probably conversed with people or were overly gracious or polite, and most people would take people up on their offer. Hey, can I get you that? Or, hey, don't worry about it, I've got your back. Or can I get you some tea? And by the way, can I make you some dinner? And on and on and on. So do you think that you encouraged some of that because you were so used to being a slave in that sense?
Oh, absolutely. I think you just nailed it. I mean, it was kind of like, wow, I was the best drug for mommy and daddy. I can be a good drug for everybody. And people liked me because of
that's
that.
The reinforcing,
then it would exhaust me.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the reinforcing quality, because, we're not crazy. We're made crazy. And you were on a particular track. And the track was, if I please them, they will like me. And that's going to be my reward. And you were set up so that you didn't make people work for it. You worked for them. They didn't work for you. How about them trying to please you? It didn't go that way, did it? Because that system, that track wasn't developed, was it?
Exactly. And I kind of wanted to develop that track the whole time, but it was almost like I was being energetically pulled. It was just so strongly embedded in me, like you talk about the encoding.
And here's the sick part. The weaker you get, the more you need that love. And the more you need the love, the more you're going to go back to your old system of people pleasing. And the more you please people, the more you're going to be drained by people. And then you're going to collapse into the WTF zone. Chaos, defenses, and breakdowns, and it'll cycle through. And it is exhausting until you get to therapy, and therapists will naturally, hopefully, talk about boundaries and talk about the vampiring effect, and hopefully talk about the system gone wrong, which very few therapists actually delve into, and hopefully talk about the cause, which very few therapists delve into. Because the main focus here is for you to identify these childhood wounds in order to identify your reactions and encodings and start dismantling them and complete exorcise, if you will, get out of your system the emotional toxins that these narcissistic dynamics leave us with. And I do, just like with the other caller, I want to read you an article on narcissistic men and their mothers, because it's different with men, it's different with women. And so you learned a little bit about the effects of narcissistic mothers on their daughters. And here's an article by, let's see here, Berit Brogard, DM, Psy, PhD, Narcissistic Men and Their Mothers, Why Selfish Mothers Tend to Raise Selfish Sons. That doesn't sound like you're a selfish son. It sounds like you're more on the codependent spectrum. So this is correct. Right. That's more what you became. Although people of all genders become increasingly more narcissistic, there is a form of narcissism that seems to afflict men more than women. This is a form of narcissism that stems from a very close and unhealthy mother-son attachment relationship. Data indicate that men who are raised by narcissistic mothers have a slightly greater risk of becoming narcissistic themselves than men raised by non-narcissistic mothers. That's interesting. I'm learning something every day. This may not come as a surprise. We often end up being just like the parents we once despised and swore we would never become. But in the case of the sons of narcissistic mothers, the tendency is even stronger, although there are also cases in which the child of the narcissistic mother becomes codependent, which is your case, rather than truly narcissistic. Okay, so I just wanted to read the audience this, and understand that it could swing both ways. That the narcissistic mother will often start out by idealizing her son and putting him on a pedestal like an object and bolster the ego, but unless he continues to please mother, which is unlikely in adolescence, the rebellious stage, the mother begins to resent him, and I guess at that point takes the son off the pedestal. Okay, but you leaned more toward the codependent. So go ahead, we have a few minutes, so ask me some questions about these internalized objects and boundary violations. And I think you mentioned words like maybe enmeshment or, You still there?
No, I'm still there. That was good. That was interesting. One point I wanted to say was that there was a time, I think, in late adolescence where I felt like, wow, I think I could become like my mother, actually, but I had a gravitation towards the opposite. Mm-hmm. So I was like almost kind of intentionally wanted to do the opposite. Well, anyway.
But don't forget, also, just one little point here, don't forget that when people invest in the other in a codependent relationship, at some point they'll expect the grand prize. They'll expect that they will turn around and start giving and then resent the person for the poor investment that they made. Do you have any experience with that one?
Oh yes, definitely.
Oh yes. Okay.
Yeah. I've played that dance.
Okay. Okay. So go ahead and ask me what you wanted to regarding the other aspects.
Well, I kind of wanted to know, because I know that there's just a part of this psychological file that hasn't been completed. Like you said, a lot of therapists don't take it to its conclusion and really focus as specific as this mind map does. And it feels like it's really necessary to identify my negative core beliefs. But the negative core beliefs I come up with are they're not the one-word ones that you seem to come up with. Like I come up with these full sentences. But
go ahead.
I guess it's kind of I come up with I am a piece of property of other people.
Yes.
Or I am a drug for other people.
Yes. Makes total sense given your treatment.
Yeah, is that unworthiness or powerlessness?
Yeah, but I like the way that you put it. That's how I put it. And when I do therapy with people, I'll shoot negative core beliefs at them. Something like, okay, so Clinton, you are only worth what you do for other people. You are only an object of pleasure for other people. And then through the discovery of this, you can see where your trigger points are and how your pattern unfolded based on the injuries of childhood. So that's really important to identify. What is really crucial that most therapies don't get into is to actually complete the file through helping people release the psychological poisons in a therapeutic manner. And if that's not done, then the repression and the depression and the suppression and all these essions stay within the system and nothing really gets resolved. And then people play it out all over again.
Okay, so let me ask you this. In just reading your book and listening to your videos, a lot of times, and seeing all this very clearly, my body responds, and it almost feels like there's this tension easing out of my body. Is that kind of what you're talking about with the release? Or are you talking about going a further step and actually screaming at a pillow or something.
No, not screaming at a pillow. I'll tell you more specifically. In the mind map process, what we do is we create a series of truth conversations whereby we allow the person to process all of their negative emotions within the therapy. So the repression is lifted. So in the therapy, you put together literally, I call it a damage list. And we go through conversation after conversation so that these repressed feelings get completed within the context of the process. And so it's not just yelling into a pillow, those exercises that many therapists give their patients: write a letter, burn it, call your parents, tell them how much they've hurt you. Bad advice, very bad advice, because most parents are, especially if they're such injurious parents, don't want to hear it, will defend against it, and will use it against you. And so you will basically hit your head against the wall and hurt yourself even further if you try to express the pain to the herder. Remember my show, Herders Cannot Be Healers. Watch it, everyone, because it's significant information. We keep going back to the WTF. We keep going back to the herder, thinking that they're going to heal us through the hurt that they caused us. Wrong. They're just going to re-injure us.
Yeah, that is so important, and I'm so glad you just keep repeating it, because that seems to be something that I've had to learn time and time again, like just, modify the contact, don't have certain conversations, keep it light, because once I start looking for something, I get burned every time.
Well, you will get burned every time because you're expecting a new paradigm out of the old a person's the old system of the person. Unless they've done work and have shifted, there will be no ability there to self-reflect. There will be no ability there to self-correct. There will possibly be little to no empathy there. And so you're basically talking to the hand. And it's very painful, because what we heard from most of all is human disconnect. And if you're trying to connect with a human disconnect, you're going to get more disconnect, obviously, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So it's a bad exercise. It's a dangerous, and it's a self abusive exercise that I recommend people keep away from.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I mean, I guess, Paul, I still can't believe I'm actually on the show. But this also seems to fit with how you talked about complex PTSD.
Right, because complex PTSD is the PTSD that we don't know about. It's the unconscious PTSD. If you were held up at gunpoint, which I was held up at gunpoint, so I know what it feels like, and I suffered from PTSD, I know I also suffer from complex PTSD. So if you take complex PTSD and then you take a live event of a violation, you develop, I think, the double version of it, or something like that. And so if we're unhealed at the childhood wound level, okay, if we cannot overcome the injuries of our past, and then we're traumatized in life, we have a less ability to be resilient. Does that make sense? That's why veterans who have had complex PTSD have a much more likelihood of experiencing PTSD. And how do you heal that? You've got to follow the yellow brick road of symptoms. And so the symptoms point to the cause. And as you know my thinking by now, the cause is always the system gone wrong, the multi-generational transmission of the system gone wrong. And if the parents are not putting themselves, their children before themselves, then they're going to create codependency, low self-esteem, toxic shame, narcissism within their own children, lack of empathy, or people-pleasing behavior, the outcomes are very variable, as you can see.
Yeah. I'm also curious what you think about, like, I got married 7 years ago.
Okay.
And I've had a real big problem feeling like engulfed, like, because it's almost like...
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect question, because this comes up a lot. So here's what's going on. In your dynamics, your mother in particular, this is the effect of the narcissistic mother on the son, is the covert incest. She violated your boundaries, so she got in there. And so for you, the merging with another human being represents some sort of a vampiring effect, some sort of a taking from you. So you haven't yet learned to distinguish that there are people who will do that to you, or you're not picking people who are more whole and complete. And so you're going into this, this merger, let's say, with your ex-wife, and you're scared that she's going to take advantage of your vulnerability, which is what happened to you. So then you would want to...
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, that you say that, because it's also the association with marriage, because I almost feel like my dad left when I was 12, and my mom married me. And it was a forced marriage. And so, like, when I got actually married, it was like, for me, there was this deep association that I didn't even see at the time, that marriage was like me being raped or me being engulfed, being taken against my will, even though I did it voluntarily.
Well, you were engulfed. You see, we as a human race are supposed to separate and individuate from our family of origin. And your mother didn't allow for that because she needed to have you as her little slave. And so that's what you learned to associate women to, is that you're there to serve them. So in the case of being married, she's now married to you. You're her little husband, which we call the parentified child. And now your wife comes along, right? And you're already taken. You're already married. And so
yeah, it was like just being doubly engulfed.
Right. And so I'm guessing, I'll put money on it, that your wife and your mother did not get along. Am I right about that one?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, I figured so. Okay.
But what saved it was I knew better than to let my mom too close. So I knew enough to keep some boundaries and distance at that time. So that kind of saved it from getting too bad, because I already had some decent boundaries with my mom by then.
Okay. And I'm sure your wife didn't like it that you were so enmeshed with your mother, even though by then you probably had decent boundaries. I'm betting that it bled through, and there were possible fights where your mother pitted you against your wife, and so on and so forth, and created a chasm there. Did that happen?
Well, she tried to. Both of them tried to. Okay. But I was able to prevent it, actually. I guess I just knew better, So I backed them both into their corner and said, look, you deal with me, not, through me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you learned, you grew, and you got the boundaries that you needed to become more individuated. And so this would be your work, is for you to go through the cycle of identifying the childhood wounds of engulfment, smothering in particular, this enmeshment, and complete it so that it's not infecting your future relationships, because that doesn't belong to your future wife. That belongs to the cause, which is always the blueprint, which is also always mother and father, always, because that's our blueprint.
Yes, exactly, and that's why this mind map has helped me, because I knew there was still some there that was spilling over, that where the file hasn't been completed.
That's it.
And I'm so glad I just found you on YouTube, because I feel like I'm getting the tools to to release the last of it so I'm not carrying it around for the rest of my life.
Right, and it's not about writing it on a little piece of paper and burning it in the fireplace, although that helps. It helps to write it out. It's really about having an enlightened witness to the crime of narcissistic abuse. And I know you're all the way in Atlanta. For those of the people who are listening, again, I mentioned that Yitz Epstein is starting a meetup group every Sunday, I think starting the third week in December in Sherman Oaks. So if you want to join in, call the Psychological Healing Center or contact us and we will give you more information about that. Hopefully in the future we will have webinars and support groups. We're working on that. And in the meantime, if you don't already have a copy of my book or PDF of my book, do you have a copy of the book or a PDF version?
The hard copy, not the PDF.
Okay, so by all means, let us know and just call in tomorrow or leave us your email and remind me that we spoke and we'll get that right over to you, okay? So for all of you who are listening, just remember, system gone wrong, multi-generational. The effects of mothers on narcissists, on their children are very, very pervasive. It's the secret, deadly killer of spirit, of esteem, of really of feeling that one can separate properly and individuate properly, as Clinton is talking about. And so in order to do the work, we do have to go back into the past. We can't just skip over it and pretend that it didn't happen. And one thing that I think many people appreciate about the mind map system is that we do it in 10 sessions. Phase 1 is in 10 sessions. And then if you want follow-up, you can, of course, continue to follow up and call us anytime you need to as needed. So just a couple of other points. Can we break the trend and teach people to become more altruistic, meaning less narcissistic? If narcissism is grounded in childhood attachment patterns, this is going to be difficult. But there are many ways to teach emotional intelligence to children outside of the home. For instance, as an obligatory component of elementary school. So this speaks to my heart because I would love to get the mind map into school systems. And if there's anybody out there who's involved in a school system, let me know, and I'll make sure that each and every family member gets a PDF copy of the mind map. All they need to do is call, inquire, learn a little bit about what we do, and I'm hoping that we can make a difference at the causal level. We teach children math, science, and English in order to develop their brains. We should include psychoeducation. Mind map education would be a wonderful way where children can quickly identify their childhood wounds and not allow it to embed into negative core beliefs. And if we can do more preventative, then we will save the next generation. And as I say in my book, one of my favorite quotes is that smart people, it's from Einstein, smart people solve problems. Geniuses prevent them. So it's time that we use the mind map system to prevent problems, not just to solve problems. So I really appreciate everyone calling in and all the beautiful, beautiful emails that I'm getting. And I do try to read them, and the requests, I will try to attend to the requests. And I just got a beautiful bouquet of flowers from somebody in the Czech Republic, and just the lovely cards that have been pouring in, and gifts and flowers. And I'm just really, really overwhelmed. It's just such an honor to meet my audience and know that I'm making a difference. So thank you so much for all your kind words and acknowledgments. And with that said, I am going to go right to Shrink That Tune. So thank you, Clinton, for calling in, and do be in touch, okay? I think he's gone, but thank you, Clinton, anyway. Okay, so shall right between a mother and a child. So this is a obvious song of lyrics about a mother and a child. I just want to quickly go through this and shrink this tune. I know you don't like me, don't like the things I do. The saddest part just might be that I don't like you too. So I guess this is a baby or mother talking to a baby and a baby talking to the mother. You think you know my story? Well, maybe you did for a little while. I guess that's the way it goes sometimes between a mother and a child. So just because you give birth to a baby, it doesn't mean it's automatic love. All my life, you've reminded me how you struggled 9 long months. So this is the baby talking to the mother. Your aching back and your swollen feet, how you almost lost me once. You say you gave up everything, all the dreams you had. Told us kids were the only reason you stayed there with our dad. So can you hear a lot of the blame and the shame and the toxic guilt of putting all of this load on the child? It's all your fault that I stayed with your dad. It's all your fault that my body hurt. And you want me to cry for you. You want me to feel the way you do. I'm sorry your life let you down, but the fault is not mine. So here's somebody getting healthy and understand that she or he is not the cause of the outcome of this and not the cause of her mother's misery. It's not supposed to be like this between a mother and a child. You want me just to just agree with everything you say, call my dad the bad guy. So this person is identifying the mother projecting all over the father, is identifying the fact that she's trying to be used in service of the mother's, she's trying to be used as a flying monkey, actually. Make him pay and pay and pay. It's really not my business, never was or ever will be, but I know nobody's perfect, and that's counting you and me. Yeah, that's counting you and me. I don't remember all that happened. Mama, I was just a kid. But if it was really all that bad, why do you wish I did? You want me to cry for you. I'll never feel the way you do. I'm sorry your life let you down, but the fault is not mine. It's not supposed to be this way between a mother and a child. Oh, a mother and a child. You're my mother, and I'm your child. As if the kid has to remind the mother, wait a minute here, grow up. You're my mother, and I'm your child. And again, I picked this song because it represents the system gone wrong, where the mother is blaming, shaming, projecting all over the kid, and putting herself first. And in this case, the child in this beautiful song is recognizing that the mother is narcissistically injured and is recognizing the blaming and the shaming system gone wrong. So thank you for tuning in. Do subscribe to our channel and request a free consultation and a free PDF copy of the book. And again, thank you very much for all your kind acknowledgments. Good night, everybody.